r/AskReddit. What's your creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? Removed the painting from the wall during a late evening cleaning, put it away, and returned to the wall to see a never before seen painting on the same spot. Put a chill down my spine. What if it was just a stack of paintings like the one SpongeBob puts in front of Mr. Krabs' first dollar? Whoa. Any more details? Was this a residence? What was the subject of the new painting? I'd love to hear a bit more, if there's any more to share. Apartment I had lived in for long. Inherited it after some, while and the cleaning was some years after the inheritance. The painting was of a Victorian field picnic with diffuse figures, no face pointing towards the viewer. I assume it hung under the first painting. Simplest explanation. It was considerable smaller, but it was extraordinary how I did not see or feel it at all when walking away from the wall. My friend Sarah was in a nightclub, drunk off her face, when she got an overwhelming urge to tell a total stranger that her leg hurts. Edit. It didn't. All a bit strange. She ignores it, but it doesn't stop. So she walks up to this guy and says, I know this is crazy, but I've got a huge urge to tell you my leg hurts. I know that's crazy, again. Sorry. But he bursts into tears. Turns out his dad had just died, and they made a pact before that. If there was an afterlife he would get a message to him saying a totally random phrase, so there could be no mistakes, which they decided was I've hurt my leg. Man, that's wicked cool. What the? I've been interested in glitches in the Matrix for years, and have read all the best Reddit posts on the subject. This is the first one that truly, deeply got to me. What an intensely moving and strange situation. So this has always bothered me. I was 13 years old at the time and my dad was a coal miner. He worked third shift, known as the hoot owl shift, which was midnight to noon. As such he got home around 2 PM, and slept till around 9, got up, had dinner with us, and left for work. My dad was always pretty gruff and constantly yelled at us if my younger brother or I made too much noise and woke him up after getting home from somewhere, which as an adult now I completely understand. So one day I did something to wake him up, I forget what. Anyways he calls me back to the bedroom, and I'm expecting to get a dressing down, but he just looked at me and said, "It's okay. Come over here and give me a hug." What 13-year-old boy wants to hug their dad? I kinda squirmed a bit, and he followed up with, "What if something happened to me?" and just laid there all grizzled and tired. I didn't hug him. That night there was an accident in the mine. He saved everyone on his crew, including the one person he went back in for. His was the only death, and I'm convinced he knew it was gonna happen. I'll never forget his eyes that day. If someone asked you for a hug, give it to them. I love you, Dad. I remember being pretty young, like 9 or 10, and I was the car park of a pub in England, Southend. I remember seeing someone in their teens in the window of a house looking over the car park. They waved at me, and I felt like I knew them somehow. My parents asked who I was waving at, and I said just some lady in the window over there. Didn't think much of it. Fast forward 10 years. I was at my nan's new house. I remember walking into her room, which I never was allowed to do, going to the window. I then realized I was in the house looking over that same parking lot, and remembering that interaction years before. Then a girl around 9 or 10 who was in said car park waved at me, and I waved back. I felt like I knew her. Could not explain it, and have never told anyone about it. It freaked me out. The sheer act of breaking the rule of entering that room tore through the fabric of space-time. Don't mess with Nan's rules. This happened to me and a group of friends while on LSD. We were standing on the side of my friend's canal in his backyard when on the other side in the distance we saw a flickering light and shapes of people sitting down at a table underneath a large tree. We get bored and decide to make the long walk around the neighborhood. to get to that exact spot after an hour or so. We eventually get there. The table is empty, so we sit down and I begin playing with my lighter. We joke about how maybe we'll see ourselves, and when we look back at the spot we had been standing in prior, we see 3 people matching our heights/builds. Could it have been the LSD? Sure, but that's not as cool. I wouldn't say that this was creepy, but it's definitely one of the most quaintly surreal things I've ever experienced. So, back in 2016, I was injured at work, and for about 6 months my life consisted of going to physical therapy and being confined to bed until I could walk again. With that in mind, I had a lot of time to read books. One of the books that I was reading was Ex-Heroes by Peter Clines. Now I don't know about anyone else, but when I read a book I like to cast the characters in my head, coming up with how they look. One of the minor characters in this book was named Elijah, and because I know someone named Elijah, and because the book is set in Los Angeles where I live, the Elijah in the book became the Elijah that I knew in my imagination. But then, something strange started to happen. The Elijah in the book made specific references to movies like Aliens, a movie which the Elijah I know is a huge fan of. The Elijah in the book was a big fan of firearms, as the Elijah that I know is. Put into words, these details seem slim, but there was something so strange about the character in this book that I eventually reached out to the Elijah that I knew to ask about it. Turns out that Elijah knows the author, Peter Clines, who had put him in the book. What are the odds that I would choose to buy a random book with a story that takes place essentially on my street in Los Angeles and features someone I know in real life as a minor character? That blew my mind, and it's easily one of the most surreal experiences I've had. This one is super cool. That's so amazing. The only thing that'll close the whole circle is you telling Peter Clines lol. I was on vacation on Florida visiting a friend. We were walking on the beach on a perfectly sunny day when everything went black for a second. I think it was weird, but explained it away thinking that my eyes were playing tricks on me until he looked at me and said, "Did everything go black for a second?" The gods were quick saving the simulation. Sun was just on the fritz, don't worry about it. I had this happen once, and looking up I saw it was a plane. It was in a position so that the shadow was huge, but I didn't hear the plane itself. Get out of here with your logic and facts, I'm trying to scare myself. I died. I saw it. I lived it. Either it was another world with a version of me that died I saw, or I'm going crazy but I died. We had a pep rally in school, and after it was finished we had to go back to class. Well, my friend and I were not into that, so we wanted to do across the street to Sonic. Across the school there is not heavy traffic, but if you don't pay attention you could get hit. Well, I remember walking with him, and he dropped something, so I went across the street first. I just saw a red Tahoe heading right for me, and I got hit. I remember everything. I remember gasping for air. I remember waking up and sleeping again. Then nothing. All of a sudden I was back in the stadium again, and the exact same words came out of the principal's mouth. My friend wanted to go get Sonic, but I was freaking out. Was asking him everything. I thought it had to be a dream, so I went with him, just to see what would happen. He dropped his stuff again and I waited. To my horror, that same red Tahoe showed up. I told him that I'm going back to school. I ain't dying again. I can still see the other version of me on that street, just messed up. Not even moving. Okay, holy ducking shit, I'm so glad I scrolled this far, this is incredible. Quantum immortality. Might get buried but oh well. When I played baseball as a kid, they were handing out the trophies at the end of the season. They called out the names of the kids while we received our trophies. There happened to be a kid with the same name as me. We met after the ceremony because it was weird, since our last name isn't a very common one. We had the same birthday and everything. We looked alike, Both our dads were named Derek and both of our sisters were named Lily. As a kid, I found it cool. As an adult, I find it cool and also disturbing. There's a podcast called Radio Lab. They did an episode on coincidence that has a similar story about a girl in England that releases a balloon with her name and address on it. It floats some hundreds of miles and lands in a guy's yard whose neighbor is the same age with the same name and has a bunch of similarities. 1985. My ex-wife and I were sleeping. There was a small sliver of light coming in through the window from a street light, so the room and bed were dimly visible. Our black Pomeranian was at the end of the bed asleep. I dreamed that I woke up, reached down to pet him, and he turned into a glossy black bivalve/oyster thing which opened up to reveal rows of gleaming glass teeth. I woke up to my ex backpedaling up the bed over the pillows towards the wall. I asked what's wrong. She said, "What is that shiny black lamb thing with the teeth at the end of the bed? Where's the dog?" We had had the same nightmare at the same time. This still gives me a chill. Sorry that your dog was haunted. The description of the thing sound like the monsters from Stephen King's novella, The Langoliers. The story came out in 1990 and a TV miniseries came out in 1995. I see that comparison. I saw the movie, but in my dream, the nightmare thing was like a trust violation. I think I reached down to pet it, and it reared back and opened up. Ack. It did not move around, just opened up like a gat to hug. Two things. Each was witnessed by at least one other person and both were while driving. Once at a stop sign in a neighborhood. All of these little sparkles started swirling around in midair roughly 3 to 4 feet off the ground out of nowhere. The group of them were roughly 2 foot wide by 3 to 4 foot tall. It lasted 3 to 5 seconds, and then they were gone. No one was around, and when I asked my passenger if he saw it too, he breathed a sigh of relief and said yes. We spoke about it a little more, but there is no reasonable explanation. The second happened when myself and 3 friends were driving down an empty country road. Very straight stretch. A man on a bike appeared. Someone said to watch out for him, so not to hit him, and then he disappeared. Our minds were blown to say the least. Just poof and he's gone. All of these little sparkles started swirling around in midair roughly 3 to 4 feet off the ground out of nowhere. The group of them were roughly 2 foot wide by 3 to 4 foot tall. It lasted 3 to 5 seconds and they were gone. Someone in your party leveled up. One day when I was about 8, I didn't go to school because I was sick. My friend was supposed to bring me homework etc, but he never came. My granddad came home from work and he told me that that friend was dead. I was devastated. That night I had a dream. I was with my friend at a playground next to our school and we were talking. Then he told me that he is safe and it didn't hurt when that car hit him. The next day my mother wanted to talk to me about that situation and she asked me if I wanted to know what happened. I told her that I know everything because my friend told me. She thought that my granddad told me, but he did not. He said that he did not wanted to tell me without her knowing it. That night I had a dream again, and I was talking to him again. We were playing and having fun, and he told me that he really had to go, and we won't see each other ever again. The next day was his funeral, and I really haven't had a dream about him ever since. Jesus gave me goosebumps. My daughter had an incredibly similar dream the night her best friend passed away. Her dream had her playing with friends in the enclosed play area of the nearby rec where they hung out usually. Her friend called to her from the path just outside of the play area, beckoning her to come over. My daughter called back to her ecstatically to come and play, but her friend shook her head and said that she couldn't because she had to go soon. So my daughter ran over to her and they hugged. Her friend told her that, like your friend, she was safe and that it hadn't hurt when she died. She also told her that my daughter shouldn't be sad because she was happy and okay. They then hugged again and said goodbye before her friend walked away down the path. I chalked this up to some kind of psychological coping mechanism in dream form. That is until a few hours later, my daughter told me that her other friend had had a dream exactly the same as hers. I still tell myself it was a coincidence, but I have that seed in my mind that there may have been more to it than that. I once clocked out of work at 6 p.m, like I always did at the time, and began my hour-long train ride home. After I had found a seat, I went to sleep and woke up just before my station. From the station, it is a short bus journey, 10 to 15 minutes, to reach home. During the entire journey, I didn't use my phone and I don't wear a watch, so I didn't really notice the time anywhere. When I reached home, my family surprised me with "You're home early, everything alright?" I look at the wall clock, and it is about to be 6 p.m. I was too shocked to understand what happened. Checked other watches, cell phones etc, and the time is absolutely right. A few days later, the admin emerald does the timesheets for the month, times clocking in and out, and every single days for me was around the same 6 p.m. So it certainly wasn't me having left work earlier. To this date, I haven't figured out how I gained between 60 to 90 minutes that day. I had just pulled into the parking lot of where I worked and was walking towards the building. It was like 3 in the afternoon, broad daylight. All of a sudden, I heard an ambulance's siren start sounding. Naturally, I looked down the road to try and see the ambulance. I see it approaching and decided to watch it for a bit. It was quickly getting closer and it was about to pass right by me. However, there was a large SUV waiting to turn out of the parking lot and onto the road, blocking a few meters of the road from my view. The ambulance passed behind the SUV, probably about 50 feet away from me at most, and I vividly remember the siren becoming completely silent in that instant. The ambulance had vanished entirely as it passed behind that SUV. I was so confused. The road did not have many cars on it at the time, and it was broad daylight. I did a triple take and made sure that I didn't just miss it. I had a clear view of the road going both directions, and there was no more ambulance to be seen. No more siren either. I walked up and down the road, trying to find it for a solid minute. But nope, it was gone. I was well rested, not on drugs, and I didn't have a history of hallucinations. It seems dismissible, but I was completely aware of what happened, and I can't explain it to this day. As someone who used to have such hallucinations, security footage helps a great deal. Also, a pet is really useful. If they aren't responding, I could relax. Around 12 years old, I was watching Megas XLR, or something that was on at the time. Sitting there, I noticed that the sun just turned off. Like completely. I was real confused, opened the blinds, and it was dark. Show was still at the same spot, but the clock on the cable box said it was 5 hours later. My best guess for what happened was that I passed out without realizing it, like those nights where you lay in bed and blink and suddenly it's morning. So I'm guessing I fell asleep sitting up for exactly enough time to have Cartoon Network play a rerun of the show get to the exact spot I fell asleep at. Was surreal though. I think you just fell into a light sleep. Sometimes when I'm in the passenger seat of a car on a long drive, I'll fall asleep listening to the radio. When I wake up, it feels like I didn't even sleep and I can remember everything that was on the radio, but the other person in the car is certain I sleep. I snore. I had an experience like that. I sleep with headphones in due to tinnitus, so I usually play a few old episodes of a podcast to get to sleep. There have been times where my dream will have the podcast playing in the background, perfectly intelligible, and I can fall asleep, listen to a few episodes, and wake up with the podcast still going, and pick up where I left off in the dream, perfectly fine. It's wild. This happened around 1991. It's the middle of the night. I'm standing in my sister's living room, and it must be a full moon, because even though it's around 1 AM and the lights are off, I can see clearly. There's a mixing bowl with popcorn kernels in the bottom on the floor in front of the TV and some rental VHS in a pile nearby. I hear a noise and turn around to see my sister's normally very friendly Labrador retriever looking like Cujo. Fangs bared, snarling, hackles raised. Suddenly there's a bright flash of light and I wake up like I hit the bed from a great height. I think that was a weird dream. Eventually, I fall back to sleep and in the morning I call my sister, planning to tell her the story, but she preempts me by telling me about the weird thing that happened in the night. They woke up to the sound of the dog snarling at about 1 AM. Her husband thought there was a prowler in the house, got a gun, and went to find the dog. She was standing in the living room snarling at the middle of the room. He couldn't see anyone, so he flipped on the light. No one was there. The dog instantly stopped snarling and walked to her bed like nothing had happened. He checked the property and went back to bed. We talked a bit and I found out they watched some rental movies and of course we had popcorn. Why? My sister is a little woo-woo at times, so I decided not to tell her about my night. She lived about 450 miles away by the way. How TF you tryna tell me you accidentally astral projected? Whack. Whoa. You astral projected to your sister's house and the dog sensed you. That's really cool. You've reached the end. You're a star. Destroy the subscribe button for more like that.